All right. Well, my question was going to be though, how did you go from say bluegrass to like AOR rock? I get that, you growing up and everything.
Yeah.
How did you make the leap
Mhm.
to being a progger? To playing prog rock and
Well,
big, 20-minute epics and everything else.
right, right. Well, I don't know that I was really thinking in terms of that way. So one of the things that was happening, keep in mind that, growing up in the 80s, it was a lot at that time, it
We
was a
must be
lot
around the same
about,
age. Yeah.
probably pretty
Yeah.
close, pretty close.
Hmm.
So, that time it was all about the guitar player. Everybody was
Hmm.
arguing, like, is Eddie Van Halen better than George Lynch,
Right.
or is George Lynch better than Rammstein or whatever? So
Yep.
so it was all about everyone was listening to these technically cool things, and then also at the same time, I was also as I was as a saxophonist was also getting very much into the classical saxophone world, which is still a very
Hmm.
much a big important part of my life. My doctorate is saxophone performance, mostly in
Right.
classical music. I've played with symphony orchestras. I've played in saxophone quartets. I've done
Hmm.
all these kinds of things. And so so I think that just because I also was getting very much into the classical music side of it, there was also sort of this idea in my teenage brain about, virtuosity in music, you know, is something to be admired and things like that. And so my older brother, who, he was getting very much into, at this time he was listening to Slayer and things like that, stuff I never really got into. And so I inherited some of his old albums that he wasn't listening to. And in those was Yes Songs
There we
and
go.
Kansas Point of No Return. And so
That'll do it.
those were sort of my gateway. Those were my two gateway albums. So then I really got into Yes, really got into Kansas, then started listening to Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and eventually Rush, which is
Hmm.
probably my biggest influence and my favorite band of all time. And so that just sort of led. I actually had a philosophy professor when I was in college, who actually I'm still good friends with, at least through Facebook and everything. But a very cool guy who was the guy who introduced me to UK, Gentle Giant, and some other stuff, that I wasn't aware of, and was loaning me CDs and albums all the time that I was checking out. So that's the mark of a good professor there, introducing me to
Hmm.
to some of that great stuff. So yeah, so that was
Yeah,
sort of
they
how I got that as well.